Right. Oh, you're fine. Yeah. I want to know the little thing first that I never carry. Right. My daughter called it a grown-up waiting for Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, leggings. I know. Test, test. All right. Good evening. I think are we waiting or are we ready? Okay, I can't see Mary, but I'm just going to get started. What's that? Okay, thumbs up. All right, thank you. I am Renee Stetzer from Reconnect Rochester. Welcome all of you to the newly renovated Little Theater 1 and to our first in-person event in what feels like 800 years. Welcome to all of you that are joining us virtually as well. If you are joining us virtually, there is a link to the program booklet in the YouTube description. Tonight's Reconnect Rochester Street Film was done in partnership with the Healthy Kids Coalition and Common Ground Health and the Drive to Be Better campaign led by Causeway of Community Partners. Thank you to Mary Hadley and Mike Bolger. You probably saw Mike out front at the Drive to Be Better table, and Mary Hadley's up here. She's going to be giving a presentation later, but thank you for being part of our Street Films team. We've worked alongside these people and organizations for many years to advocate and educate to make our streets safer for everyone. So no one organization can make change alone, and we're grateful to have our community partners. I also want to give a shout out to Mary Starpoli, the engine of our organization, and her partner in crime, Monica Reichenstein, who, there she's up front here, who put all this together for us tonight. Mary's in the back here, trying to hide. We'd like to thank our sponsors for tonight's event. Our premier sponsor is the Community Foundation. They have been a steady source of support for us for many years, enabling us to have these community conversations, and they understand the importance of transportation and mobility in our community. Much gratitude as well to the Genesee Transportation Council, which not only provided financial support, but lent support for the program in other ways, such as our video equipment and lots of data, which you'll see a little bit later. So shout out to Bob Williams if he's here for his data prowess and helping us out there. There will be a panel discussion a little bit later, and we will be taking questions from the audience. So there will be volunteers passing out cards. If you think of something, fill it out, and our volunteers will pick it up in time for the Q&A session. We ask that you all keep your mask on, except when you're eating and when you're drinking, and that's a little theater policy, and also out of respect for one another, given our high community transmission right now. So on to why we are here tonight. Over the last 10 years, there's been about a 50% increase in the number of pedestrian deaths in the United States. About 6,300 people per year die walking. There are an additional 3,000 deaths that aren't counted in that because they occur in places like parking lots or driveways or other private areas. Every single state in the United States has grown more dangerous for people walking in the last decade. In New York State, the pandemic brought less driving, but higher speeds, more driving under the influence, more hard braking and reckless driving, and more severe crashes because of that. And that speeding trend is something we saw across the country. In Monroe County, over the last decade, there have been about 3,000 crashes involving pedestrians that resulted in 2,863 injuries and 92 fatalities. On average, 9 people die walking on our local streets every year. And behind each one of these statistics, there is a personal story, a personal loss. Yesterday on the Evan Dawson Show, if you tuned in, you heard Radeja and Arya share their heartbreaking stories of experiencing, witnessing, and healing from personal tragedy as a result of traffic violence. And one of the things that was most difficult for me to hear was when Radeja said she's saddened by the disregard that we have for one another, for human life out on our streets. And that's why we're all here and why we do what we do every day together to work for the common good, a community where everyone can get around safely, regardless of their age, ability, income, or mode of transportation. A community where we have regard for one another, for human life out on our streets. So thank you for coming tonight. We're going to move on to some film clips, and you can follow along in your programs.
Cars have ruled the streets of New York City for too long. So today, that ends. Instead of pedestrians being afraid of cars, cars are going to be afraid of pedestrians. Come with me. Ah, mother. Excuse me, sorry. Let's go this way. Sorry. Let's see what the cars themselves have to say about this. Excuse me, sir. Interview, just for a second. Excuse me, no, just my seat. Excuse me, sir. One quick question. This lady inspired me to go bigger. Stop. Question. Other question, sir. What you're doing right now is illegal. Did you know that, sir? It's illegal. What you're doing. Thank you very quickly. Do you know that what you're doing right now is illegal?
What's illegal?
You're supposed to yield to the pedestrian, but you went through anyway. You think that you never. Oh, excuse me. You're supposed to yield to the pedestrians. You have the right of way on that one.
No, but if nobody is crossing.
I was crossing, my friend. You almost did it. Now we're holding up traffic. Do you know that what you're doing right now is technically illegal? You're supposed to keep the crosswalk clear. Everything's illegal. Also, do you know that on average, once every 2 hours, a pedestrian is either injured or killed by a driver in New York City? That's a hell of a stat. Did you feel personally guilty for that? Oh, hold on one second. Can I interview you? Great question. Do you know that cars are single-handedly the biggest cause of climate change?
That I do not know.
Do you feel guilty about that?
Nope, I feel guilty about nothing.
Also, you were texting. That's illegal. Have you ever hit anybody?
No, don't jinx me.
You ever killed anybody? But not in a car, just like in general. No. You haven't killed anybody.
No, technically no.
Okay. All right, just checking. Thank you. Go get this person. All right, it's time to step it up a notch. Use my homemade horn. This is my friend Mark Cleve connecting an actual car horn to a 9-volt battery. It's so loud. Sorry. Slow it over, slow it. That's what I'm telling him. The baby carriage. Hey! This guy was walking. Says walk. Cars. How you don't have a warrant? The school bus good? To the random guy playing trumpet. And see. Time to step it up another notch and bullfight some other cars. Here's my native beef with cars. Why are our cities still shackled to these obsolete gas guzzlers? 1/3 of Manhattan is given over to cars. Imagine what we could do with all that free space if we liberated the streets from the automobile. Get wet, BD. That'd be sweet. Well, a girl can dream. Go easy. Damn. I couldn't agree with you more, my fine feathered friend. Got one.
Had a lot of calls from people that were like,
Oh,
now in the middle of the street, jumping in front of traffic, doing this, that, and the other thing.
oh, okay.
What exactly were you guys filming or doing?
A video about traffic safety. Yeah. It's part of, Vision Zero.
Yeah, it'd be very ironic if you were trying
It would be,
and you got.
and I got hit. No, I know.
So please.
There are
smarter ways of
There
going
is.
about doing it.
There is, you're
Much
right.
safer, a lot
Yes.
safer. Please, guys, get home safe.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one. Thank you. So we'll definitely call that a day.
My niece and their events, and my three nephews were killed on the Roosevelt Boulevard on July 16, 2013. So that one night she was walking home, and two guys were racing down the Roosevelt Boulevard. They were going so fast that the other drivers who were behind them came to a point where they just saw, they thought it was trash, they thought it was debris, just, you know, like they just went through, I don't know, maybe a bunch of weeds and it just all went up in the air. And come to find out it was my niece and the babies. By the time our family got to the scene, the police officers and people were looking around for kids, and we were just so devastated, like how fast were these people going? We seen their clothes, we seen their shoes, we just seen everything on the street. My niece and my nephews, they weren't the only people that died on the Roosevelt Boulevard, and not even the only people that died in that location. People just took it as a norm, you know. You're risking your life if you press the Boulevard. What has happened in the recent years is that a lot of many little strip malls have been being built along the Roosevelt Boulevard. And they're just building, you know, and they decided, we were thinking like, okay, well, you decided to build the Walmart here, you decided to build, you know, Chick-fil-A, you decided to build all these different type of department stores. Did anyone think about the people who live in that neighborhood? However, everyone should have a cost. Because there's older people that try to cross the boulevard because, let's say they're not driving any longer because they're older. They don't have their license any longer, but they want to get across the street to the pharmacy to get their medication. Or get across the street to the supermarket, which is on the opposite side of the road. And they're making it half right. So it may take 2, maybe 3 lights for them to get all the way across. But sometimes the drivers are not paying attention. You know, like everyone says, it's a flat, open road. And some parts of the road, the speed limit goes from 40, right? They're driving flat and it's 40 miles an hour. Then you're going a little downhill. Now at the bottom of the hill is 45. Why? We suffer every day when we don't see my niece and my nephews. You know, Samira is my first niece. She was amazing. 27 years old. You think that's young, but honestly, it seemed like she lived a full life. She learned how to be a mom early, but she lost her mom. For her siblings, it's like they lost a second mom. And she was the life of the party and the family. She just, when you have holidays and a family gatherings, just imagine. She was the one who would put on the family entertainment. She had all the boys practicing dances and songs. And she had all the girls practicing and dancing all the time. Unfortunately, we haven't had anybody to take over and take her place. You know, they say nobody can do it like she did it. We miss them every day. You know, we knew it was so devastating that we wanted people to know that she did not die in vain. My nephews did not die in vain. And all the people who lost their lives in the Roosevelt Boulevard did not die in vain. No one thinks about anyone else until it happens to them. And we don't want that to happen to your family. Believe me, we want to want it to happen.
Around 6,000 pedestrians were killed by motor vehicles in the United States in 2017. That's the highest number of fatalities since 1990. In contrast, overall traffic deaths have declined year over year. As cars are getting safer for passengers, more pedestrians are dying. And experts say there's one clear culprit. A 2018 study by the Governor's Highway Safety Association examined data from 50 US states and revealed some alarming statistics. If you look at this upward trend in pedestrian deaths, it coincides fairly directly with increased smartphone use. But the study points out that this is only a correlation. and that there's no definitive link. It's often hard for police investigators to tell whether a device was being used at the moment of impact. According to experts, the increase in pedestrian fatalities has a few more likely causes. First, more Americans are walking. As rapid urbanization increases, more people are relying on public transit and old-fashioned walking to get around. The problem is that many American cities came of age in the era of the car. Therefore, they were designed for the car, not for people. The connection is clear. More pedestrians are sharing the road with 3,000-pound metal machines, and more are dying. Take a look at this Manhattan intersection between Spring and Broadway. Between 2013 and 2018, over 1,000 people were injured and 10 died here. Despite crosswalks, the sheer number of pedestrians and cars is a recipe for disaster. But the uptick in walking doesn't quite match the fatality rate. The study points to a more likely culprit, the SUV. 2018 data revealed that trucks outsold cars for the 6th straight year, jumping nearly 8% year over year to a 69.2% market share. While most pedestrian fatalities were still a result of crashes with pedestrian cars, the rate of pedestrian fatalities caused by SUVs is increasing at a faster rate. This is because pedestrians struck by an SUV are more than twice as likely to die as pedestrians struck by a passenger car. The features that make SUVs safer for vehicle occupants are what makes them more dangerous for pedestrians. The sheer size of SUVs creates larger blind spots, creating a higher risk for pedestrians and cyclists nearby. But it's not just the size that makes SUVs dangerous. It's also how they're designed. SUVs are engineered to be tall and flat. A pedestrian struck by an SUV is more likely to be hit in the chest or head, thus increasing their chances of being seriously injured or killed. Take a look at this diagram. The person's rib cage and their essential organs are right at the top of the front end, the main point of contact. Higher clearance means victims are more likely to be trapped underneath the carriage instead of falling over the hood or to the side. The technology to prevent or mitigate collisions with pedestrians does exist, but many automakers oppose their inclusion in vehicle design. Automatic crash avoidance and emergency braking systems are available in many makes and models, and the technology works. In a 2019 test conducted by the IIHS, 9 of 11 small SUVs evaluated earn an advanced or superior rating for the pedestrian crash prevention. Features like this are standard in Europe as part of a pedestrian safety initiative, but these systems are not required by law in the United States, and instead are only available in optional packages. American regulators considered adopting similar pedestrian safety goals years ago, but automakers have resisted. The agency never made clear its reasons for abandoning the idea, but the motivation for it likely faded as pedestrian fatalities continue to drop on their own. It's pretty clear that American SUVs are not being designed with pedestrian safety in mind. And US officials and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration have been reluctant to make and enforce any regulations in the past decade. The inherent dangers that the front end of SUVs pose to pedestrians isn't going to change anytime soon. And as more and more Americans choose light trucks over passenger cars, you can expect the number of deaths caused by SUVs to increase.
My name is Scott M. Crawford. I'm a retired clinical neuropsychologist. I came down with multiple sclerosis in 1999 and had to retire. And I use a power wheelchair for mobility. Since my retirement, I have rededicated my life towards ending this disease and sclerosis, and also creating a more welcoming society for people with all abilities, advocating for the needs of people with disabilities.
My name is Gladys Bundy. I am the president for the Fixed Route Committee for J-Train in Jackson, Mississippi. I've been the committee president for over 5 years now. I've been trying to get the transportation department, J-Train, to become a better service for the city of Jackson.
The presumption is that everybody has their own car, and everybody can use their own car for all their trips. And that's just not so. We know this.
I rely on what is called Medicaid waiver, which now since I've become disabled, one of the services that they offer to me is transportation. By having that transportation, I have to call like maybe 2-3 days ahead of time to schedule a ride to get to where I'm going. And I'm only limited 4 hours per day, and as many days, like 5 days a week or 3 days a week, that I can get the service to go around, pay bills, make groceries, etc., and take care of my own personal business.
Before Jackson saw the light and started to create more complete streets, it was horrible. It was incredibly stressful. I would have to ride my wheelchair in the street against traffic, knowing that I could lose my life at any time. That's incredibly stressful. Whenever I left the house, it was making a decision. Is this worth risking my life? It's like playing Russian roulette. And so, leaving the house means a decision. Is this trip really worth my life? That's how it feels.
It is extremely hard, but there are no sidewalks. Out here where I live now, or where I'm trying to move to, there are no sidewalks. There are none. And I don't know what they were thinking when they built the city, not to put sidewalks down, but there are no sidewalks. People, if you're walking down the street where I live now, you have to walk in the ditch on the grass to keep out of traffic. It's quite dangerous either way.
Most of the streets in Jackson remain inaccessible and unsafe for pedestrians of any kind, especially people with disabilities. Most of the streets we have don't have sidewalks at all. The sidewalks we do have are extremely narrow, often obstructed by utility poles. They lack curb ramps, and are in ill repair, so they're not safe for anyone. So a lot of folks have to walk in the street, or they walk in the dirt and mud next to the street, if that's possible. And basically what that communicates to us is your life doesn't matter. Pedestrians don't exist at all here. It feels like society is saying, you don't belong. Get off the street. You're in the way. Or at best, your life is expendable.
It is a message that I got a car, if you don't have a car, oh well. I feel like they just don't care.
I-55 frontage roads along 55 North here in Jackson, they have something like 6 lanes going one direction, no sidewalks whatsoever. And the few sidewalks that we have that go under the overpasses, they don't even have curb ramps. They're not usable by anyone with disability. And those motorists are blind. It's meant to advantage people in their automobiles getting somewhere as fast as possible. And there is no consideration for the safety of pedestrians or people that use transit.
And when I was riding the bus before the pandemic hit and slowed the service down, you get put off, depending on where the bus stop is. You get put off in the grass, you get put off on the corner, and most of the time, sometimes, the sidewalk or the street is busted up for whatever reason. And you have to step over busted up concrete and things of that nature to, you know, in order just to get to a safe spot so you can safely walk down the street where you gotta go.
In my neighborhood, they had to put the road on a road diet. They had to get rid of a lane, one lane of traffic, so that they could add multi-use path and sidewalks, bus stops that are accessible. Through a lot of hard work, some very dedicated people at the City of Jackson Road, and won a very competitive tiger grant for that funding. Thankfully, we won. And that gave us some of the funding we needed to make this happen. Now, as we have done better and developed some accessible sidewalks on some of our streets, at least in my neighborhood, it's a pleasure to go out. I feel like other pedestrians, I can totally see it. It's no stress. The quality and independence I have now is massively better.
If you imagine a typical American city street and you take away the space that's dedicated to cars, you aren't left with very much. There's some narrow walkways on the side and some bridges in between them, but not much else. Cars dominate cities. You spend some time walking around most cities and you'll find yourself pushed to narrow sidewalks, waiting for crosswalk lights. You'll find cyclists navigating really narrow strips of space.
Americans are used to cars the way that fish are used to water. And that's so ubiquitous in the US that I think most people, it just never occurs to them that it could be otherwise.
But what if there were a way to change that, to give space back to pedestrians and bicyclists, and to make cities more friendly to life outside of a car? It turns out Barcelona might have a solution. In 2014, the city was faced with serious air pollution problems. Barcelona and its 35 surrounding municipalities consistently failed to meet the EU's air quality targets. And studies were showing that air pollution in the region was causing 3,500 premature deaths every year. Traffic in the city also causes severe noise pollution. So the city developed an extensive urban mobility plan with the hope of reducing traffic by 21%. The coolest part of the plan were these things. They call them superilles. Superilles? Sí, superilles. That translates to super blocks. It's this urban design concept intended to minimize the presence of cars in city centers. The word super block has been used before to describe huge city blocks without any passageways for cars, but that's not what's happening here. So here's how Barcelona's plan works. You take 9 square city blocks and you close off the inside to through traffic, so buses and big freight trucks, or any vehicles that are trying to get from one part of town to the next, have to drive around the perimeter. Inside the super block, the speed limit is kept to 10 kilometers per hour. That translates to just over 6 miles per hour. And curbside parking is replaced by underground parking. And that means you wind up with street space for markets and outdoor games and events.
Within this 9 square block perimeter, you're going to have kind of a pleasant streetscape where people can walk around and mingle and do things without this kind of constant fear of cars around.
The concept is going to be tested out in 5 neighborhoods, but the city has identified 120 possible intersections throughout the region where it could be implemented. So how do we know what the results of this kind of plan would look like? Well, northwest of Barcelona is a city called Vitoria-Gasteiz, which has implemented superblock designs since 2008. In the main superblock at the city center, pedestrian space increased from 45% of the total surface area to 74%. And with so much less traffic, noise levels dropped from 66.5 decibels to 61 decibels. Most impressive of all, there was a 42% reduction in nitrogen oxide emissions and a 38% reduction in particle pollution in the area. And on top of that, business is up.
What you consistently see when people change their streetscapes to prioritize human beings over cars is you don't see any decline in economic activity. You see the opposite. You get more people walking, cycling around more slowly, stopping more often, patronizing businesses more, and that kind of that center of social activity will tend to build on itself.
So here's the question. Could something like this work in an American city?
Barcelona has some unique advantages getting started on this plan, in that a lot of it was built before cars and a lot of it was built on a simple grid.
The district of Rochester, which is where the superblock plan is based, was designed in 1859 in this repetitive grid structure by this guy, Ildefonso Da. He basically invented the word for and the study of urbanization when he laid out this grid plan for Barcelona that evenly distributed resources like schools and hospitals. But superblock designers insist that cities don't need a simple grid structure to implement this kind of plan. It can work anywhere. Now, cities in the US have attempted some car minimizing projects like this. The problem is they're usually done in wealthier areas with lots of existing businesses. Zoning policies often require separation of residential areas and commercial areas, but an ideal walkable area would be a mix of the two. On top of that, zoning minimums on parking availability encourage the presence of cars and parking lots, and minimums on street width make for really wide, unwalkable streets. And because of that, walkable districts are basically isolated luxury items in the US. What makes the Barcelona plan different is that they aren't setting aside one fancy neighborhood or town square to make pedestrian friendly. Instead, by proposing superblocks throughout the entire city, they've declared car-free spaces a right for everybody, no matter what part of town they're in.
Maybe this might be overly optimistic, but I think it's sunk in the US that the model whereby every city resident comes with a car and drives a car everywhere is just inherently limited. It limits the growth of your city. It limits the health of your city and the growth of your city. So one way or another, we have to find ways of having a lot of people live close to one another without all of them having cars. Being able to get around and work and play and live and have enjoyable lives without cars. So
Today, this is how the American road looks.
All right, hello everyone. Thanks again to our group, Monica, Renee, and Mary, for pulling together those great film clips there. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I'm gonna hop, my name is Pete Novosny. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Reconnect Rochester. I'm gonna do a brief presentation on some data, both capturing some of the things you saw in the film there, but then adding some local data that we have about this issue in our community. And I'm going to try to move quickly because I want to make sure we get to our panel discussion as well, because I think we've got some really great conversation in store for you. So, as you saw in the films there, kind of mentioned several times, we have an increasingly dangerous experience in this country walking. Fatalities have risen at an alarming rate over the past decade. Some of those reasons we talked about in the films, between SUVs, between cell phones. I was thinking about how when the first texting and driving came out, you saw the signs on the thruway about pulling over and stopping. And the point about having a hard time with enforcement around that really struck me, because originally all you could do was text, right? And now these smartphones have the ability to do everything in the world on it. And I personally think there's a lot that's kind of within that's driving it. But you can see these statistics across the entire country, including our community. Pedestrian fatalities have really skyrocketed. And in our county, Monroe County here, we've had nearly 3,000 crashes involving pedestrians in the past decade, with 92 fatalities and quite a few injuries, including many really significant serious injuries. And that works out to about 9 people who are walking around in our community every year who are killed. And that's, every one of those deaths is obviously a tragedy, as are people who are injured from that. And like many issues in our community and in society more broadly, this impact of this issue is not felt evenly. There are quite disparate impacts across the country by age, by race, by income. In particular, people who are older, Black or African American, American Indian or Alaska Natives, and people who live in low-income communities. Those are the groups that are most heavily victimized by traffic violence and by death and being struck by cars. And there are lots of reasons, some of which are also, I think, captured by some of those dynamics that we have more broadly in society. But in particular, I think the fact that there's this presumption that if you own you own a vehicle, you can get around in the community. Well, if you don't own a vehicle, you're dependent on the existing infrastructure that's there. And we know in this community about a quarter of city residents don't have a car in the household. And those are folks that are relying on sidewalks, on crosswalks, on our streets to get around. And if those streets aren't safe for them, they're going to be more at risk of being harmed. And there's a lot that's gone into that. We've had a lot of discussions in this community about some of the decisions we've made around urban planning and things like that in the past. But the reality is that there are still some really dangerous places in our community. As you can see, I'd encourage folks who haven't been there, who haven't seen our crash map to visit either our website or drive2bebetter.org and check out that crash map. And it really, I think, captures the dynamics that are present in this community. And so this is some new data that hasn't really been seen before, that we want to thank Genesee Transportation Council, specifically Bob Williams, for pulling this together. So they're looking at census data on who lives where in this community. We have these racially, ethnically concentrated areas of poverty, which the residents make about 10% of the population. You can see on the map here, the red circle in the middle there is downtown. These are areas that are north, west, and southwest of downtown. So with only 10% of the residents, you have 36% of the pedestrian crashes in this community happening in those neighborhoods, in those census tracts. And the crashes are more serious. And so where we're seeing this impact in Monroe County is in communities of color, in our lowest income communities more heavily. Obviously, crashes happen in every corner of the county. Again, look at that crash map, but it's important to note that the effect of unsafe streets, of unsafe driving behavior, and people losing their lives is more heavily felt in certain parts of our community than others. I think that's really important to keep in mind as we have this discussion tonight. And so a lot of this data, these trends are happening for a long time, but we have seen both, I think, all of us perhaps experiencing life in this community over the past year and a half. We've seen this situation made worse by COVID. At first, those first couple of days, I remember taking a bike ride with my daughter, who was 3 at the time, around, and the streets were empty, and I felt like you could kind of get anywhere. And she was riding on the back of my bicycle, and it felt like this, oh, we've got this great urban park here. But then really quickly, I felt like people began to realize that they could speed a lot more often. There wasn't as many kind of things out there that were stopping people from, flying down a 30-mile-per-hour road at 45, 50 miles an hour. And we know from all the data that's available that when cars can move as fast as they want, that puts pedestrians, cyclists, and it puts anyone who's out in those streets at risk, or off the streets, as cars often leave the streets and go onto sidewalks. So speed kills and COVID, the dynamics that have been present from this pandemic have allowed cars to move a lot faster and to be more deadly in our communities. So that was just a really quick run through some of the data that we have available. Some rainy day, I'm going to try to really dig into a lot more of the crash map data, because I think there's a lot of fascinating things in there in terms of when these crashes happen, what the road conditions are like. Just looking through it, I mean, there are crashes every hour, every minute, over the past 10 years. And it's not just things that are happening at night when it's raining, when it's snowy, it's happening all the time. And I think we need to understand that this is an ever-present challenge and threat in our community. So I'm gonna ask our panelists to come up and join me on the stage here. And we'll start the conversation when they're all set up and comfortable. Thank you. So wherever you'd like. All right, thanks again to our panelists. I'm gonna just briefly introduce you, and then you can each go, and we'll go down the row and explain kind of what brings you to the stage here tonight. Immediately to my left, we have Christine Corrado, and then Destiny Ford, and Eric Stevens, and Aria Camioni Lind.
Camioni Lind,
yeah, we talked about that. I guess Christine, starting with you, as closest to me, what brings you to the stage here tonight? Why are you interested in this issue, and what are you active with in terms of this issue that we face in this community?
All right. So I'm currently a Brighton Town Council member. Back in 2017, 2018, living in Brighton, town that is typically seen as a walkable, bikeable community. I was very happy to send my middle school daughter off to school every day on her bike from our neighborhood. Felt that she was pretty safe there. One of her friends, same age, 7th grader, was pedaling along the sidewalks of Monroe Avenue, got to the intersection of Torrington, Monroe Avenue, and Brooklawn. It's one of those goofy little joggy intersections with traffic lights on Monroe Avenue and high-speed traffic and neighborhood streets on the side, and crossing guards who are there to keep an eye out for the well-being of everyone on the sidewalks in the morning. And this middle schooler was doing her thing, getting to school, safe every day until this one day when the convergence of a courtesy wave and a driver rushing to cross the main thoroughfare from the other side, and the inability to see the traffic lights and no crosswalks and a busy crossing guard all came together, and this little girl was knocked off of her bike, injured badly. The driver was horrified, so thankfully they stopped and they took care of it. But this was a little girl who lived in a neighborhood where the idea is give our kids wings, give them some independence, let them be a little bit free range. Also a little girl from a family where her parents are very safety minded. This is not a kid who's out there running wild. I was horrified. So immediately pulled folks together. We created a little organization, Brighton Safe Streets for All. I was up on my soapbox all the time, and long story short, now I'm on the town board and doing what I can to make our town live up to its walkable, bikeable, safe, pedestrian-friendly community in an equitable way, and that's good for all income levels, all ages. I think that is in a nutshell why I'm here.
Great start, thank you. Destiny Ford, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Do you want to give our audience an idea of how you came to the stage tonight?
Yeah, so 2 years ago when I was a junior in high school, one day when I was getting off work, I was hit by a car in front of my house. And I wrote something like for today to kind of explain. Hi, my name is Destiny Ford. I'm 18 years old and I'm a first-year student at St. John Fisher College. I had to get a ride here tonight because I was unable to drive my car. Earlier this week, I lent my car to my mom, who parked it outside of our house on Post Avenue. While I was on campus, Apparently, a car was going too fast on my street and it flipped over and ended up near my neighbor's driveway. It hit my car in the process, and now my car is in the shop. 2 years ago, before I even had a car, I was arriving home from my job at Teen Empowerment. My sister had driven me and parked in front of our house, the same spot. As I was getting out, a car tried to fit between myself and the car across the street. It hit me. I fell and went under, and the tire drove over my leg. Then the car took off and left the scene, while I lay there in shock waiting to get helped up. It took a few minutes for the pain to kick in and for me to realize I was not okay. After an ambulance ride to the hospital and x-rays, the doctors told me that my leg was broken. I would need to be in a cast for 4 months and then a boot for 3 weeks after. It was my junior year in high school and an important year if you were planning to go to college like I was. I had to be out of school for a while, and I couldn't go to work at TE or participate in youth events. I was also just hired at Highland Hospital, and after a few days of training was out of work. Obviously, I could not walk around the hospital, so I had to put that part of my life on hold as well. Being off my feet and in my house, in my room, was a mental challenge for me, but I got through it. This didn't need to happen. If the driver had been paying more attention and looking out for people, this could have been avoided. There are now 3 kids in my house, and those kids live in my neighborhood too. If anything had happened to them, it would be tragic. If there were speed bumps or flashing lights, people may be more careful in these neighborhoods. I know that tonight is about some of the solutions so that our streets can be a safer place as well as our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Destiny. All right, Eric Stevens, thanks for joining us tonight. What brings you here on the stage?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Destiny for telling her story and for being up here and raising the awareness of pedestrian safety. So thank you for being brave. I'm here through my work at Common Ground Health. We are a regional health planning agency. I know that's a lot of words, but really we're trying to make Rochester a safer place. And a lot of that work is around play. And one of my colleagues out there, Mike Bulger in the back, is a real advocate for pedestrian safety and as well as play. So when we look at play, we're trying to find the reasons why parents aren't allowing their kids to go to parks or to walk to school. And I'll get more into the data later when I talk, but it's really a fear of cars and just the uncertainty parents have to allow their kids to walk. Just coming here today, I was coming down Jefferson Avenue and it's pitch black, there's ATVs popping wheelies, dirt bikes popping wheelies. And I thought, wow, I'm coming to here to talk about pedestrian safety. And we see this every day in the city that streets are not safe. So I'm here really to speak on our work and to raise awareness on the importance of safe streets.
Thanks so much, Eric. Aria, you were on Connections yesterday. For those who were able to tune in, I've heard some of this, but I think it's worth repeating certainly elements of it. Yeah, please share what brings you here with us tonight.
Thanks, and I just want to say +1 on what Eric said, Destiny. Like, you're amazing, and we love you. So I'm here because in 2017, my 7-year-old son Malcolm was struck by a car on our street. He was outside playing after dinner the Friday of Memorial Day weekend with his older sister and maybe like 15 other kids on our street. And he went to cross and the motorist was distracted and struck him. He rolled up over the car and landed on the other side of the car. He had just a ton of injuries. When the car struck him, it broke the passenger side headlight. And as he rolled over the car, that slashed his hand down to the bone. He had, multiple contusions and just all kinds of things all over his abdomen. He hit his head on the street when he landed on the road. The car, luckily, was only going like 15 or 20 miles an hour. but it still hit him with enough force that it literally knocked his ball cap off his head and knocked him out of his shoes. So his ball cap and his shoes were on other parts of the road around him. He spent 5 days in the intensive care unit, the pediatric intensive care unit. He was unconscious for the first 3 days. The fourth day when he was conscious, he couldn't speak. He had good receptive language, but where his brain injury was affected his ability to talk. The first thing he said to me was, "I want some Jell-O," which was the best sentence in the world that I've ever heard. And that like day 4, when he finally came out of his, I don't know, whatever it was, like the not being awake, coma, sedation, all that stuff. He had to work with a physical therapist to be able to take a couple steps on his own. He had to be able to go up and down 2 steps before he could leave the hospital, and he had to be able to get on and off the toilet by himself. So that's what we spent a bulk of the time after he woke up trying to do. We brought him home after 5 days, and he still had a really long road because the TBI, the traumatic brain injury, was significant enough that they couldn't tell us when he would be back to normal, and there was like this lingering, like he might never be back to normal. His hand was severely injured, and he had other injuries. Some we didn't find until the summertime, so that happened in May. And in August, when he went for his regular dental cleaning, the dentist came out like totally ashen, could barely speak, and said, "You know, Malcolm's molar is cracked down to the nerve. We've got to take it out. It's from the accident." So we were still finding injuries months later that weren't bothering him as much as his TBI and his hand. So he's 11 now, and he's amazing. He's in 6th grade at School 10, Dr. Walter Cooper Academy, and he's doing great. And I know that COVID sucks, and I wish that we could go back in time and not have to go through it. But for my family, that year of quiet made it so Malcolm was able to heal in ways that he wouldn't have been able to. And I feel like I'm getting my kid back. So 4.5 years after that accident, I feel like I'm starting to get my little boy back, and that feels good to me.
Thank you so much, Aria. Thanks for sharing that story and your experiences. I'll just make a quick note. I know Renee mentioned it at the outset, but if people do have questions, not comments, but questions for some of our panelists, you can raise your hand. Monica and Mary will come to you with a note card, and they'll bring it up later. And if we have time, we'll try to get through them, as things permit. Aria, I guess I'll just start with you, not to interrupt your water drinking there, but one of the things I was struck by listening to your appearance on Connections yesterday, and my familiarity, I live kind of close to you with your street. I think Reconnect Rochester, Healthy Kids, a lot of other groups were heavily invested in the idea of redesigning our streets to make them safer. And I firmly subscribe to that we need to do that. But your street strikes me as at least at first glance, a street it's kind of what we want to be going towards, right? It's very wide. It's got bends in it. It's not an easy street to fly down. It kind of encourages slower driving, yet this incredibly tragic event still occurred. So what does that say to you around some of the other things that we need to be communicating in society more broadly? What are some of the other things we need to do in this community to prevent the next Malcolm from having to go through that?
Yeah, thanks. So I live on Asbury Street on the southeast side of the city. It's a one-way street between South Clinton and Field. So it goes directly into a residential neighborhood. It's not a cut through, and it's bendy, like Pete said. There's like a big curve in it. It's a one-way, so there's parking on one side. So half the street is parking and half the street is for your car to get through. And it's also awesome because kids only have to look one way. They look both ways just to keep in practice and be extra safe, but we're really only ever worried about cars coming from one direction. And we lived on Asbury Street for over 15 years. So for us, it was like a dream come true, right? It's like, I don't need to worry about traffic. I don't need to worry about fast moving cars. But it turns out what we do need to worry about is people who are distracted. So the young woman who was driving the car was 21. She was on her phone and she was in a car full of teenagers. So her passenger was a little older than her in the front seat, and then there were 3 teens between the ages of 15 and 18 behind her in the back seat. And the music was going and people were talking and she was on the phone, not like texting, like having a phone conversation. And so for me, this really means that, yes, we need to make sure that our streets are designed to promote pedestrian and cyclist safety, but also we as drivers, people who get into vehicles, need to be super aware of what's happening around us. And we need to shame and peer pressure the people around us who aren't acting like that. We have to act right when we're in our cars. We can't be on our phones. We have to pay attention to weather. We have to make sure we can focus and that the sound level in our cars isn't so loud that we can't pay attention to what's happening around us. So it really becomes this community care thing for me of being aware of each other and paying close attention to who's doing what when. And if you see somebody doing the wrong thing, saying, you're doing the wrong thing, stop doing that. Pay attention, put your phone down, turn the music down, asking your teenagers to be quiet in the car while you're driving. Being really intentional about how we take up space together.
Thank you. Eric, Healthy Kids, which you're staff within Common Ground Health, has, as far as I know, has always prioritized the importance of play and for kids to be able to play, whether it's at school, whether it's in their neighborhood, and how important that is to their development. And I'm just curious. So how did you all get from, or maybe it didn't evolve this way, but from a focus on we need to be able to ensure kids can play and have access to their to playgrounds and things like that to really, you guys are such an incredible partner in this community around things like pedestrian safety, around rebuilding intersections to make them more safe. What's the evolution there? What's the work that you all have done to really embrace safe street design and improving the kind of walkability of our community? How'd you get there?
Thank you, Pete. First of all, I'll also say, going to what you were saying, it's important for us as adults to model good behavior. I have a 17-year-old driver that I'm always correcting, and he's always reminding me of the things that I do. And I'm like, but right now we're talking about him. And he's not having that. So it's important for us to model good behavior. And that's something that I'm working on. And I think we have to own that as adults and parents. So at Common Ground Health, I think we do a really good job of partnering with residents and community members and parents like Aria. So we are always collecting data. And we let the residents of Rochester kind of steer us in the direction that we're going to go in. So it might start with just thinking about playgrounds and safe places to play, but then Aria and someone else might say, well, what about the speeding cars? What about the signage? And so the residents really steer us in the direction that we are going. And I think that's one of the great things about the way we approach data collection and advocacy is that we partner with community residents from day one. And I think, Pete, you know this, doing policy work, it is a slow crawl sometimes, and you have to learn how to measure success differently. And when I first came into Common Ground of Health, I didn't quite understand that. Like, you want to start something and just get it fixed like tomorrow. And you quickly realize that it doesn't work like that. So 5 or 6 years ago, myself, Dina Faticone, and Jen Bideman introduced some colorful sidewalks in front of several schools in the city of Rochester, because there's some evidence that shows that just changing the color of the crosswalk slows down traffic because it's different to the eyes. And so we're constantly trying to bring in new, innovative, and sometimes low-cost ways of slowing traffic and increasing pedestrian safety. And I think another good part of that work is that also several years ago, we partnered with schools 10, 2, and 19 about Safe Routes to School, which is a national program that promotes walking to school every day. And it was a slow crawl, but we laid some foundational work that allowed for us to help the district this fall when there was a shortage of bus drivers, that we had started to build an infrastructure that we could work with schools and show them best practices. Mike was meeting with parents and administrators. I was meeting with parents, trying to help them come up with a plan on how to walk safely to school. And Mike and I talked a lot about how it's okay to think about it like right now when it's 50, 70 degrees, but thinking about what it's going to look like in January and making sure that sidewalks are plowed, that the snow isn't piled up on the corners, so then parents and children can't see speeding vehicles and the vehicles can't see children. So just really looking at it from multiple angles and working in partnership with community members has really allowed us to be successful.
Great, thanks so much. Destiny, thanks again for sharing your personal story and how that impacted you. I'm curious also your thoughts, given what happened just the other day, also to your car. Like, what having those kinds of events happening in your neighborhood does to a sense of community, of a sense of people to be able to kind of get together. What, like the threat of speeding cars and of a sense that you can be harmed. What does that do to? What impact does that have on the community, on you, your neighbors, people living down the street? And how is that experienced, every day? What is the impact of living in an environment where these things can happen?
I think the impact is definitely being less likely and willing to walk either if it's down the street or to the store or anything. Also, like I said earlier, there's 3 kids in my household, from ages about 3 months to 5. And so a lot of the times, they want to go on walks or they want to go to a park. But for the most part, my older sister isn't really comfortable with us walking in my immediate neighborhood because it's a very long street, Post Avenue, that runs from about Chili Avenue to past Brooks Avenue. And some parts are narrow and a lot of people just speed completely down the street. So the impact is definitely having less time outside and being able to just walk around to a trail or anything, because there's always the threat of cars speeding and not being aware of pedestrians and people around them.
Yeah, that really builds on what Eric was saying in terms of in his opening remarks around the perception, the reality of the lack of safety really preventing kids from being able to take advantage of the things in their community, which could be playgrounds are great, right? And we should, every 5-year-old should be able to get to the playground whenever they.
Yeah, Pete, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because when we were surveying all play spaces, 98% of them we identified with that really didn't have proper traffic calming infrastructure like crosswalks, stop signs, or signage or lights. 98% of the crosswalks. And it just goes to the seriousness of this problem of creating pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods and why it leads to victims of traffic injuries. And you also pointed, there's 7 or 8 neighborhoods that are at higher risk, like Josana, Beechwood, parts of the 19th Ward, Market View Heights, Bull's Head. These are these areas where it's astronomically larger that you're going to get injured than in other neighborhoods, and it's because 98% of these crosswalks aren't properly marked.
Okay. Thank you. Christine, so now you are our sole elected official on the stage for now, at least. We'll see what others get up to in the future. But so what has the town of Brighton been doing recently? And what have you been trying to push within your role as an elected official to improve pedestrian safety in Brighton. Obviously, you mentioned that group that you established, but what are the current projects and issues in Brighton that our audience might like to hear more about?
Sure. Is this right now? Technical skills are not my top skills. Sorry about that. Anyway, certainly Brighton Safe Streets for All was not the first pedestrian-focused, bicycling-focused group in Brighton. Brighton's been putting some hard work in rethinking how our car-first streets are shaped. There's the Bike Walk Brighton plan from 2012. We've got the Monroe Avenue design charrette that took place in, I want to say 2009, that re-envisioned what's essentially our main street and gave a lot of thought to the to not just the buildings along the street, but how people would interact with our business district. In 2020, we were very lucky to have the support of Reconnect Rochester to conduct another rethinking of Monroe Avenue through the Cornell Design Connect program at Cornell that also focused heavily on how people walk and bike through that corridor. And then our comprehensive plan for the town, the plan that the community builds to show what our vision is for our land use, for our business development, for our neighborhoods, for every aspect of our community. Envision Brighton 2028 really dug into taking all of those things and community input together. And one of the most resounding desires of the community was to make us live up to that reputation as being a walkable, bikeable town. And so we're doing that, some of it preceding Envision Brighton, some of it growing out of Envision Brighton. We've got the, and I'm looking at off in the corner, we've got Robin Wilt, also an elected official in Brighton, and Bill Maley, the supervisor of Brighton, sitting here, and so they can check me on the whole list of things. But we're building out our trails so that we're taking walkability off of the streets and putting it into things like the Brickyard Trail, or making arrangements with local business developers to expand the Auburn Trail. We did along Monroe Avenue, again, Monroe Avenue being basically our main street, a green infrastructure project that created some rain gardens along the street that also serve as a buffer between the sidewalk and that 4-lane expressway that runs down the middle of town. Some folks have some thoughts on the aesthetics of it. Personally, I like it. It's a little on the natural side with some big wavy tall grasses that really do make you feel like you're a little separate from the vehicles. Still pretty narrow. We have, through pressure from neighbors, we have expanded the number of marked crosswalks, especially on our main thoroughfares along most of the county roads that run through town. So Edgewood Avenue has a marked crosswalk, which somewhat coincidentally, the pressure to create that one connecting the Willow Bend neighborhood to the sidewalk that's on the other side of Edgewood that gets you down to French Road School happened because the little brother of the girl who got hit on Monroe Avenue got hit at that crossing point where, and I don't know how that happens that one very safety-minded family has 2 kids get clocked by cars while heading to school. They have a 3rd child, and so far, no car interactions in that way, thank goodness. But we're making a very focused effort at identifying those spots that need better markings and then working with the county DOT, state DOT, bit by bit. A little piecemeal in some respects, but in other ways, we've got some bigger things in the offing. Whole laundry list of them. We can probably talk about those later. I don't want to dominate, but very, very surgical approaches right now.
Sure. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously, that's a lot of things, right? So there's a lot of active efforts going on in Brighton, in recognizing these things take time and there's long timelines on a lot of this stuff. But what have been the main barriers to like actually getting some of these things, to happen? like what slows the process down? Is it sort of normal bureaucracy of government? I'm guessing has some of it, layers of government, but community resistance. Like what stops these things from happening tomorrow? Because obviously there are still challenges in Brighton as there are throughout our community with these streets remaining, unsafe to some degree today, tomorrow, the next day.
Right, yeah, some of it is bureaucratic and some of it is intentional design, where suburbs were built out to be car first. And we can really get into a conversation about the equity issues there and the cost to the community and individuals to have a car to get around to do whatever they're doing. But because the community is built out that way and we are, our main thoroughfares are county roads or state roads, we need to be engaging with our partners in the DOTs and trying to work with them to find that new perspective on the rules. So it's culture change and persuasion and creative thinking that has to go on, and that doesn't happen quickly. Robin Wilt was essential in getting the East Avenue Road Diet underway and completed. And the challenge there was dealing with a DOT that was focused on the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And if you haven't read it, you should. It's really fun because it's got pictures and signs and all kinds of stuff, but it is the Bible for civil engineers. They are professionally formed to count on that, that code for how they shape streets, and it's very car first. And so you have to spend your time convincing them that 2 extra feet on the shoulder to create a proper bike lane will not so drastically reduce automobile flow through, and they cannot get their minds around it because they are very safety first themselves, but it's safety for cars first, and they are very focused on the liability issues. If they design improperly and suddenly vehicle crashes go up because of poor road design, that's on them and their profession. So trying to work on that, finding that sweet spot, recognizing that the streets have to be for everyone, even if the professionals who are very good at what they're doing are seeing it from a different angle. It's dollars too. Even though the roadways are state or county, those main thoroughfares, much of the cost falls to the town, and the town doesn't have deep coffers to undo what was done 50, 60, 70 years ago that was car first and not to the town's, the town didn't necessarily ask for that, but that's what we've got right now. I could go on.
Well, we may get back to it. So, and I think that uniform traffic, this may be the only audiences that would agree that it's an enthralling read, right? So I'll throw this out there to anyone who wants to answer it. But I think, knowing what I know about this audience, I think people would generally agree around the need for us to have, greater driver awareness, greater education of drivers, safer street design. I mean, I think those things aren't universally held in this community, but I think they're probably broadly held in this room. But I do wanted to see what folks think about one issue that I think there may be some disagreement about in this room is what role does enforcement play in these issues of traffic safety, of pedestrian safety. And I'll open up to anyone who wants to take that, but how do you see the trade-offs? Because there are trade-offs that exist in this community around disparate impact of enforcement, the historical ongoing structures of racism in this community that could lead to certain groups in this community being more, facing more punitive sanction, I guess, around some issues of enforcement. On the other hand, we're talking about people's lives and their safety in their neighborhoods. And so yeah, again, I'll open it up and see what folks have to. Eric, I think you've got the mic close to you, so I'm gonna call on you.
Yeah, Pete, thanks. So first, I just want to touch back on what Christine said. Like, one way we're trying to tackle those issues in Rochester is by like modeling it. Like, I think of our Play Rochester neighborhood campaign. When we first started that in 2015, the city of Rochester really wanted nothing to do with it. And so we modeled like how it could work. And in 2019, the city approached us and wanted to take it over. So it can be like modeling it for them, showing like how it can be done the right way and addressing all the barriers. And then the ultimate goal is to get government to take that over and then implement it on a larger scale. And with Play Rochester neighborhood, there was barriers with RPD. They didn't want to help with us with almost anything, but we were able to model like how it could work, and then that slowly got the wheels turning. But I really appreciate you asking that question. And for me, as a Black man, I've had so many confrontational interactions with RPD and with New York State troopers. I could talk for hours. And so I do know that we need police to enforce, but it's the way they enforce that really matters to me. And I know that we can't tackle that on this stage at this night, but really there being an environment where there is mutual respect both ways, where you just don't give respect to police because they're police, but you give respect because they're people, and they give respect to us because we're people. And I don't want to get too emotional about this. I laud what they're doing in Philadelphia with what they're trying to do as far as not pulling people over for minor traffic infractions, but issuing tickets. But then you do need enforcement too, and so trying to find that middle ground where both those worlds can come together and work effectively is the $1 million question that I wish I had the answer to, but I don't. But I do struggle with that issue, and I don't know if I gave a good answer. That's just from my heart of what I deal with as a Black man, but also understanding that we do need police and they do play a role, but needing us to work together and not work against each other.
Great, thank you, Eric.
Eric is looking at me because he knows I have stuff to say about police. So I'm just gonna +1 everything Eric said. And like double down on this like feeling of ambivalence around enforcement. I am not a huge fan of police enforcing laws and ways of being and knowing that are for the social good. That's not what police were designed for. Police aren't designed for upholding the social good. They're designed for something else. So for me, there's this feeling of like, we have to figure out something, but I don't think it has to do with police. I definitely don't think it has to do with New York State troopers or RPD. So for me, this is like we have to do something. It's us. These are our streets and our neighborhoods and our children and our school communities. And it's us. It's all us. It's our stuff. We need to figure it out. And I'll add that the driver that hit my son was a young Black woman. And my husband and I were like not even a little bit interested in pursuing legal action against her because that was just, I don't think I'm allowed to swear. That was a type of storm that we weren't interested in participating in because we know about how inequitable the incarceral system is and policing. And so that's where I end up landing is we need something, but it has to be us. And I'm not a big fan of police enforcement.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up with that. Like I think you had mentioned it earlier in your first comments, like education. And when people take their permit test, I don't think my son was asked any questions about pedestrians. And if he was, there was just a few. And so it starts with education. And I think that would be a more effective way to change the narrative around pedestrian safety is greater education.
And if I can hop on to that, the flip side too, from the police perspective, they don't want to be spending their time worrying about the little things. They do, as you said, they have bigger things to do for our communities. And Eric, as you said, with the education, we need to collectively re-educate ourselves. So many of us forget what the rules are and expect the police to do the reminding and enforcing. In our community, the perpetual, endless discussion about when you have to yield for someone in a crosswalk. Is it when they stand there and look like they're going to cross? Is it when their toe crosses ever so slightly into the white on the pavement off the curb? Is it when they, and people will go in circles and circles, and they will pull the state code up and point to the words and say, oh, it means the driver always has the right of way, really, until the pedestrian's in the crosswalk. No, flip side will be, but how does the pedestrian get into the crosswalk in the first place if the drivers don't stop? And they'll go back to the law and say, well, the police need to enforce it. Nope. We need to be responsible for remembering pedestrians have the right of way. And for heaven's sake, 2,000 pounds of vehicle totally outweighs 180 pounds of human.
And I don't know if I'm the only one, so I might be embarrassing myself, but in one of those videos on Mount Hope, I didn't even know what those flashing lights were for until I watched the video. And I drive down Mount Hope all the time, and I had no idea what that was. So like ultimately, who's responsible to make sure that I'm educated about that?
Right.
Raise your hand if there's anyone else that did, or maybe don't, because then I'll feel really embarrassed.
You can't see the lights.
But I had no idea what those lights were for.
That's right near my neighborhood. I kept looking for my car. I was like, please don't let me be one of those drivers.
So actually, maybe that leads into one of our audience questions here, which is, what should we be doing to change driver expectations that will always have the ability to travel quickly through urban, highly populated areas? I mean, I think about it myself sometimes when I know I need to be somewhere in 7 minutes and I pull it up on Google Maps and it's like, oh, that's 7 minutes away. And then any kind of traffic, I'm like, oh, I guess I'll be late. And I'm kind of a person who's comfortable being late, so it's like kind of cool, but a lot of people aren't, right? And so how does that, how do we change that expectation that you should be able to get across any part of town uninterrupted? And if there's a pedestrian who's walking that crosswalk, well, you have to get somewhere. How do we change the mindset of people to have a little more charity to one another on these things?
Well, Pete, I'll say the things that we're doing at Common Ground is working with residents. I think about our friends that live in the Parcells neighborhood. We really work with them to redesign the way that street could look by putting beautiful artwork and different play themes. That might not be the right term, Mike, correct me. But really to help calm traffic and help drivers think differently about driving, because like Parcells used to have a lot of accidents and there's a lot of children in that area. So really rethinking the way we design roads and the way traffic flows. I mean, and we're seeing more roundabouts coming. So really just rethinking how we design roads. And I personally live out by Charlotte on the lake. And I find myself flying down Lake Avenue. I feel like it's designed for me to drive fast. So if I'm going to be honest, I have to own that. And my son calls me out about that. And so it's really like looking at road diets and changing the way roads move, because it feels like a racetrack. And I'm in my minivan flying and have to remind myself, there are pedestrians, and I'm trying to model the way I want my son to drive.
And I just want to add about Lake Ave. The speed limit on Lake Ave is 35, which is different than other thoroughfares in the city. And I thought about that when the woman was talking about in Philadelphia, it's 40 miles per hour at the top and 45 at the bottom, and why do they do that? I noticed that the other day and it scared the crap out of me because Mike has educated me on all those at 35 miles an hour, this happens, at 30, at 25, at 20. So yeah, go slower. Oh my God.
I am honestly working on that. I really am.
That's good. Does you have something?
I think maybe to like avoid people speeding as much, maybe if we kind of like support or advocate for people kind of leaving the house a little bit earlier or leaving time for travel, then hopefully that would decrease the amount of like people speeding to get from place to place.
Thank you. All right, well, we are out of time. So I want to thank, time for this segment, we got a little more to go, but I want to thank all four of our panelists and hope everyone can join me in a round of applause for getting Sorry, I was supposed to introduce the next person. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Hadley. Mary, yeah, there you are. Mary is with Causewave. Has some great info to share. Thanks.
Short person alert, okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Hadley. I'm a senior program manager at Causewave Community Partners, and I've been working with a number of people here on an initiative for the past couple of years that I'm going to talk about tonight. So I'll just share a little bit about the Traffic Safety Community Impact Initiative, and with a specific focus on the Drive to Be Better campaign and what we refer to as the 3 S's of safe driving. So the Traffic Safety Initiative is a community-led event. So these organizations that you see here came together and created a goal and to help define the problem statement. And also back in 2018, we did a community-wide survey to try and help inform our work. And that survey, actually the report, is on the Drive to Be Better website if you're interested. This is the main goal. In our community, all people are safe and respected in whatever mode of transportation they choose. So when we started, our main focus is on drivers. And as you've seen tonight, why drivers? Well, drivers have the most power and they can cause the most harm. So the Drive to Be Better campaign was developed to raise awareness of the impact that drivers have on pedestrian and bicyclist safety, and educate drivers on driver behavior best practices and laws to reduce crashes involving pedestrians and bicyclists. There are a lot of campaign assets that we put together. After seeing some of those videos, I'm thinking we could have done some additional things. But we've got a series of video ads that are based on a theme of, hey drivers, what's it gonna take for you to see me? And so you may have seen some of the previews of that if you were here early. And then we have a couple of spots focused specifically on distracted driving. We've got print ads, there are bumper stickers, we have a website, a Facebook page, and lawn signs. And I believe lawn signs and bumper stickers are available in the lobby if you're interested. So when we started this campaign, we wanted to focus on 3 main points to get across to drivers to really keep it simple. We call those the 3 S's: slowing, scanning, and spacing. So slowing, this is intended to get drivers to slow down. We've heard a lot about that tonight. We also want to educate drivers on the impact that crashes have, the impact that speed has on crash outcomes. So 30% of traffic fatalities involve speeding. And when we did our community survey, we learned people were honest, and 50% of Monroe County drivers admit to frequently speeding. And as we've heard tonight, slower speeds allow for more time to scan and to react. So on the website, and there was a piece of this statistic before, but on the website, we provide these statistics. So at 40 miles an hour, 1 out of 10 pedestrians survives being hit by a vehicle. If you slow it to 30 miles an hour, 5 out of 10 pedestrians survive. And if we go down to 20, then we have 9 out of 10 can survive a crash. And, you know, as we heard Aria's story, that was certainly important in that. But, you know, slow is not by itself. So the second S refers to scan. And this is really intended to have drivers be completely vigilant and always on the lookout for pedestrians and cyclists. We want drivers to scan crosswalks and bike lanes, scan when making right-hand turns, when backing out of parking spaces, when exiting driveways and parking lots. And the law states, you saw some in the videos, that when there's not a traffic control signals, drivers must yield the right of way to pedestrians. So the bottom line is that we want drivers to always expect pedestrians when you're driving and scan constantly to ensure their safety and yours. And then the last S has to do with space. And the intention of this is to get drivers to give bicyclists on the roadways at least 3 feet of space between the car and the bike. The other thing we want to do is we want to make drivers aware that bicycles are supposed to be or can be ridden in the roadway. That's okay. We get a lot of drivers that still think that bicycles don't belong on the road. So the campaign also is working to educate drivers about bicycle road markings so that they know what they are and can expect bikes in those places. And then earlier this year, I think it was in June, we had a law passed in Monroe County called the Carrie Ray Law. So it was signed into law to have drivers now be required to give 3 feet of space between their cars and bicycles on the road. And this law was dedicated to Carrie Ray, who was a Brockport resident, second grade teacher, who was killed while she was riding her bike back in 2019. So we've been working on some education videos to help people understand the 3 S's in hopefully a playful way. And so I'm gonna give you a preview of those. They'll be available in the next few months. You'll see them on social media. I wanna give a shout out to Devin Anglin of Static Vibrations Network, who did our videography, who did the audio and the final production of the videos. And also a shout out to Magic Spell Studios students at RIT who did the animations. So first up is Slow.
Hey drivers, did you know that driving just 5 miles per hour slower greatly improves your chance of avoiding an accident? Yeah, slowing down just 5 miles per hour makes a big difference. It could be the difference between life and death. So let's slow down and help make sure everyone gets where they need to be.
One thing you'll notice in these videos is that we intentionally try to make these very everyday situations. We didn't want to put blame, we didn't want to do shaming. We really wanted people to understand that these are best practices that can help us because anything can happen on the roads, as you've heard. And it's generally not intentional, so let's all be prepared. So the next video is Scan.
Hey drivers, did you know that it's important to always be aware of your surroundings? Continuously scanning as you drive and always being on the lookout for bicyclists and pedestrians can be the difference between life and death. Be sure to stay focused and keep scanning so we can help everyone get to their destination safely.
All right, and the last one is Space.
Hey drivers, Do you know how much space you should leave between your car and bicyclists? At least 3 feet, and more if possible. It's not only courteous, but you could be saving a life. So please, give bicyclists plenty of space. That way we can help everyone, no matter where they're headed, get there safely.
All right, so those are our 3 yeses. Quiz to the audience. What are they? Slow, scan, space. All right, be those advocates. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Good evening. I'm Mary. I'm another Mary. Mary Starpoli from Reconnect Rochester. We have talked a lot tonight about the problem that our streets are not safe enough for people outside a vehicle. There's a lot that we're already doing locally to combat this problem, and there's a lot more that we can do. So the Complete Streets Makeover is what I'm gonna talk with you about tonight. It's one of the tangible programs that we have developed locally to demonstrate and to advocate how we want to see the streets designed to be more pedestrian friendly in our community. The best way to describe the Complete Streets Makeover is by showing you in film. So sit back for a few minutes and take in a segment of the short film that we made about our first project in the Beechwood neighborhood back in 2018.
So Parcells, it really is a great example of an intersection of potential. There's a strong neighborhood around it. There are active residents who are looking to beautify this space. There's lots of kids. It's in close proximity to a library and an art center. So I think that not only can we make it safer for people to be around that intersection, slow down cars, but I think we can also beautify the intersection and hopefully help the neighborhood do what they're already doing, which is breathing life into a great part of the city.
As someone who's involved with a lot of neighborhood associations, I can tell you that this has been the #1 issue, cars speeding through residential streets. A lot of times they think the answer is speed bumps. What they don't realize is there's a whole tool chest of things that could potentially be done. So this was great, see the interest that people had, the energy that they brought, the ideas, what they learned from it, and I'm hoping we're really gonna come away from this with a really positive outcome. And then from there, doing everything I can and we can as a neighborhood to advocate with the city to make sure that it's not just a temporary thing, but that the pilot becomes a permanent installation so that we can have permanent long-term traffic calming and inclusive environment for pedestrians, cyclists, and automobile drivers.
Well, we've got everyone out here, and with paint, we're painting the intersection of Parcells and Greeley Avenue. Right now, Parcells Avenue receives about a traffic speed equivalent to what we see on Lake Avenue, a full arterial road. This is a residential neighborhood. We've got all these kids around. They want to enjoy public space, and so we're trying to accommodate for that. Right over here, we're trying to be more accommodating for the bus. There's 2 bus stops just on the east side of the intersection. And so we would like to make those accessible bus stops that anyone can use. the permanent solution that we're suggesting for this intersection, we're realigning curb edges. And so we have temporary rubber curbing to simulate that. And we've tried to further emphasize that with some orange delineator posts. But it's really minimizing that curb radii. I sat there, simulated as much as possible. What is that minimum radius that we could do?
One of the benefits of tactical urbanism is that you get to test things in a low-cost, agile way. We know that design has the biggest impact on driver behavior. And in order to change design, you need to work with all the entities that have jurisdiction over the road and who understand complete streets design and traffic engineering. And in order to implement a good long-term permanent design, you need to test it out first. And you need to do that with some on-street design experiments that allow you to adjust different elements as you go and as you learn. And that will inform your final design. And you'll get the best design for that particular neighborhood and for how that street serves the people in the neighborhood.
Well, one of the biggest takeaways for me from doing things like this is really the sense of community with them. So that's always the number one thing, is getting people out and getting them talking. How's it going, Doug?
I see a lot of new faces here that I've never seen before, and I'm normally an introvert. So, but I'm really today of all places, I'm really compelled to say, "Hi, my name is Jay. You know, what's your name?"
So that's our hope, is really continue to brighten and enliven the Beechwood neighborhood and put it on the map and be a model for the rest of the city, so that other neighborhoods that have the same concerns can be able to do. So Parcells, it really is a great example.
There we go. Pretty amazing stuff, right? It gets me every time. Feel free to go back and watch the whole film. That was just a segment of it. The whole film's available on our YouTube channel. And you'll also find there another short film that we made about our second Complete Streets Makeover project on North Clinton Avenue in 2019. But I want to tell you the ending of the story of our Complete Streets Makeover on Parcells Avenue. The beauty of this project is that it's both community and data-driven. So one of the things that makes it so impactful is that we're able to show how effective our temporary experiment is in reducing speed. So with the help of Genesee Transportation Council, we put out speed cameras to collect data, speed data before the on-street installation, and then again, post-installation. So this is the evidence that the neighborhood can use to advocate for making the street design changes permanent. And you see that at Parcells and Greeley, pre-implementation, cars travel down Parcells at an average speed of 39 miles an hour. Post-implementation, with the effect of our traffic calming measures of street painting and temporary speed humps and curb bump outs, the average speed dropped a really remarkable 54% to 18 miles an hour. We also saw, thank you. We also saw the maximum speed clocked drop from 69 miles an hour to 44 miles an hour. So that's a powerful change. Parcells Avenue is a street lined with homes. It's a neighborhood residential street, but as was mentioned in the film, because of its width and the long stretch of roadway with no interruption, people were driving down it like it was a main arterial road. like it was Lake Avenue. And in 2016, a little boy was killed there going after a ball on Parcells. So we can feel good, and really the neighborhood, it really all was through the effort of the neighborhood in coming together to disrupt this car-dominated speedway and take it back as a safe and welcoming space for everyone. So it took some time, but the Beechwood neighborhood persisted, and in November of 2020, the city of Rochester installed permanent raised crosswalks at 2 locations on Parcells Avenue. One right there at the intersection with Greeley, and one a few blocks further down the road. So you do not see cars traveling at that speed anymore on Parcells Avenue. And for every Complete Streets Makeover project that we do, we aim to, we and our partners try to continue for as long as it takes to support the neighborhood's advocacy efforts to make permanent street design improvements. And we're still doing that with the North Clinton Avenue neighbors. So after taking a year off due to the limitations during the pandemic, the Complete Streets Makeover is back, and we and our partners are so excited to take on a new project, working with another great city neighborhood with passionate people ready to make change. Each year, we begin by putting out a public call for submissions. So back in July, we asked Monroe County residents to tell us the intersections and trouble spots where they don't feel comfortable as a pedestrian or a cyclist. And this is an important basis for the program, that the ideas come from the community, because no one understands what it's like to use our streets better than the people who are walking and biking them every day. So this year we received nominations for 64 locations all over the county. 33 were within the city of Rochester, and 31 locations were outside the city in the towns and suburbs. From the public nominations we received, a program steering committee made up of city and county officials, transportation professionals, and community advocates studied the locations, and over a series of meetings this fall, decided on a winning intersection for our next Complete Streets Makeover project. They looked at criteria factors like the number of crashes that have taken place at that location, indicating the safety concerns, the proximity to kids, the potential and the feasibility of street design improvements that would make that location safer, and several other criteria. So the steering committee also selects 2 additional locations to highlight as design rendering winners. These are locations that might not be suitable for the on-street makeover project because they're too large or for other reasons, but that we want to highlight as a place that the community has identified as a trouble spot. And the design rendering winners receive an illustration created by the professional transportation engineers at Stantec, our design firm partner, that shows what that intersection or corridor could look like with a complete streets design that would better accommodate pedestrians and cyclists. And the neighborhood could use this illustration as a, either a jumping off point for more community conversation and to advocate for improvements. So without any further ado, I will begin with our 2 design rendering winners for this year. Monroe Avenue between Highland Avenue and 12 Corners in the town of Brighton is our first design rendering winner. So this stretch of road was nominated by Carl Marsiglio, a resident of the area who nominated it, who's concerned and wants to see it be safer. Over the last decade, there have been 7 pedestrian crashes on this stretch of road, resulting in injury, 2 of them serious injuries. We have some really active advocates, as you heard, in Christine Corrado and Robin Wilt, who no doubt will be there to help assist in galvanizing neighborhood support and using the illustration that they'll be provided to pursue permanent improvements. So I want to thank Carl for, if you're out there, for taking the time to nominate Monroe Avenue. Woo. Arnett Boulevard between Genesee Street and Warwick Avenue in the 19th Ward neighborhood is our second design rendering winner. So for this, we connected 2 different nominations, one that we received for the intersection of Genesee and Arnett, and one that we received for the intersection of Arnett and Warwick. A design rendering will show how that whole stretch, including those two intersections, could be designed to be safer. There have been a significant number of pedestrians hit and injured in recent years, and lots of kids walking around this area, which is a path to multiple schools, a library, teen empowerment, Boys and Girls Club. So it's a great stretch to put some effort into. We want to commend the 19th Ward neighborhood for submitting so many nominations for locations in the area, and especially the Arnett Block Association for putting together the most extensive and impressive nomination we've seen yet for Arnett and Warwick, complete with video interviews, testimonials from concerned residents. So we truly hope that the design rendering will give those groups good reason to gather up all that energy and take some action for a safer street, not just on Arnett, but extending to streets throughout the 19th Ward neighborhood. And the winner of our Complete Streets Makeover project is the intersection of Orange Street and Orchard Street in the Josana neighborhood. This intersection is right in front of School 17. It's a high traffic area where school buses and parents pick up and drop off students. It's located in an area that is firmly within Rochester's crescent of high poverty census tracts that we talked a bit about earlier. And as we, that makes it, as we talked about, it makes it more likely that people walking will be victims of pedestrian injuries and fatalities. This location was nominated by Yowenia Krakova, who gathered input from neighbors concerned about speed and unsafe walking conditions on Orchard Street. She gathered support for the nomination from a whole host of community partners. So we are excited to work with the administration and families at School 17, Charles House Neighbors in Action, the AmeriCorps Vista team, and Josana Neighborhood Association on a project that will hopefully transform the intersection and create a safer space for the community. So I want to thank our Complete Streets Makeover Steering Committee for all the time that they put into the selection process. I want to thank all the individuals and organizations that took the time to submit a nomination for the Complete Streets Makeover. And stay tuned as we work. Our next step at Orange and Orchard is going to be, we're going to start right in next week with our first planning meeting for a community workshop. So stay tuned to what's going to happen there, and we're going to do great things together. Okay, we are wrapping up here, folks. I know it's been a long program. I appreciate you all staying with it. We don't want to leave tonight though without getting some input from all of you about where you think Reconnect Rochester and other community organizations, advocacy organizations should be focusing our efforts. What do you think would be the most effective solutions for our community to pursue in making our streets safer? What's the combination of education, of enforcement, of engineering and street design solutions? So for all of you here with us in the theater, on your way out, you're going to be handed some dots. Please take a few minutes to stop and take a look at the list of solutions out in the lobby, and add ones of your own that you think we might have missed. For those of you that are still with us virtually, there's a link in the YouTube description with this Getting to Action list that you, in a Google form that you can fill out. So please give us that input. We really will use it to direct our advocacy efforts. And one other thing we ask, please help us improve Rochester Street Films by filling out the event survey. We really look at that information and make adjustments. For those in the theater, you can do it the old-fashioned way with paper and pencil. And for those of you online or virtual, there's a link to the survey in the YouTube description. And finally, oops, I missed that slide. See that? Finally,
finally, just please allow me to thank some of the folks that made tonight possible. Members of the planning committee were Renee Stetzer, Mike Bulger from Healthy Kids, Mary Hadley from Causewave, and Monica Reichenstein, most especially to Monica, for helping us pull off our first attempt at a hybrid event, hopefully a successful one. No way we could have done it without her. I want to thank Pete Nabosny for always being so generous, generously sharing your formidable facilitation skills and policy knowledge to support Reconnect events and advocacy efforts. I want to thank our panelists tonight for bringing your lived experience, your knowledge, your passion for this topic to the conversation. Thanks to Matt and his team here at the Little for being great hosts. And again, can't thank enough the Community Foundation and the Genesee Transportation Council for sponsoring this event so we could bring it to you. And thank you all for coming. And good night, everyone, and get home safe.
Last time there was a I filled in the younger age bracket. That's moved up. Yeah.
Well, plus the years, the COVID years.
Thank you so much.
Great job today.
Again, thank you for sharing your story.